Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming your way to review a movie that is decades, I don't even know how many decades, but decades in the making, purportedly. This is a brainchild of former, it's kind of a sad story, former visual effects wizard David Allen, who kind of really got into the stop motion animation frontier. I don't know when the hell that happened, if it happened as early as the 60s, definitely in the 70s, making some stop motion animation for early Charles Band production, Laser Blast. This is David Allen's brainchild that I think just decades and decades and decades he wanted to do this for. And then luckily Charles Band was nice enough to actually let him actually start doing it, I think, in the early 90s, and unfortunately before he had a chance to finish it, David Allen frickin' departed this mortal plane. It was just a goddamn bummer. Coming at you to review the motion picture by the name of The Primevals. Now, I don't think I knew anything about this movie until years ago. Full Moon, Pictures, aka Charles Band. Did they do like an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign to actually, pay for the rest of the post-production work? And I think they even got Chris Endicott, David Allen's former right-hand man, to come back. And I seen some behind the scenes. They might have actually, unless this was just BS, publicity stuff and didn't really actually happen, but they might have actually done some stop motion animation recently to finish the film. But the story behind this is really interesting. As I said, I didn't know anything about this project until, I don't know if it was, 2016, 17, 18, 19-ish, when, as I said, Charles Band made this whole project public to try to fund the incomplete, the post-production on it so he could release it. I think a lot of years went by, then we didn't hear anything, and then, lo and behold, was it 2023? They actually finally released this thing, and I was interested in it. My intention was to blind buy the Blu-ray. I had it in like my Amazon cart for weeks or whatever, and by the time, I think, like right before I think it came out, they raised the price or something, and I ended up not blind buying the Blu-ray, and then I thought maybe I could watch it digitally, and then I didn't watch it digitally, and then it just occurred to me the other day, why don't I look, because a lot of Full Moon stuff is on TubiTV.com for free with commercials. I'm like, let's just see if Primevals is on TubiTV.com, and sure enough it was. I'm like, oh hell yeah. So I watched myself some Primevals for free on TubiTV.com. So basically I got into Full Moon, I don't know if you know, but you may know if you've been a viewer of this channel for a long time. I got into Full Moon basically at the beginning of Full Moon. I saw Puppet Master when it was relatively new on home video in 1990, so I was with Full Moon from the beginning. So it was really, really, really interesting. And of course I don't, Full Moon continues to quote unquote still have output and stuff. I don't hold much of what Full Moon does these days in any kind of high regard or low regard, or maybe any regard much at all. I mean, Blade, the Iron Cross has some positive attributes to it, namely this naked chick who's naked for a good portion of the movie. But a lot of what Full Moon does now, admittedly, doesn't hold a candle to what they did in the 90s and stuff. So it was really interesting to, for the very first time, basically see this, what I can only assume. I know that, I'm pretty sure Robot Jox was like Charles Band's most expensive movie. I don't know if what's this called, The Primevals, it surpassed that and actually became Charles Band's, Full Moon's most expensive movie. I'm not exactly sure about all the details about that, but I think it was basically the most ambitious, probably biggest budget Full Moon movie at the time. And as I said, I don't know what the final cost is with the final post-production and stuff that was done the years leading up to 2023, but it was really cool, like seeing for the very first time this Full Moon movie, which was basically shot in, the early to mid 90s. And it's just, sure enough, it looked exactly like those movies did back then, shot on 35 millimeter. They looked really good back in the day. And the first thing I do want to say is, and then you know, this movie was just so weird because, you know, it's a little bit of a bummer that unfortunately, I mean, I saw the trailers, was it, you know, 2022, maybe 2023. I saw the trailer or whatever for it, and I was like, yeah, that looks really pretty cool and stuff. But unfortunately, it's just kind of a bummer that they, even with all the money thrown at the Primevals and so much, I guess, effort put into it, how unfortunately, like, god dang it, why, you know, and David Allen, you know, directed this and stuff, and it's like, why, I don't know, with a guy who's so good at like stop motion animation and stuff, why does the like the acting have to be so wooden and stuff? But if you don't know the story of the Primevals, it's really, you know, basically a simple story. And what's interesting about actually seeing it is there's a little more detail, there's a little more depth to the movie than I thought there would be based on just the trailer. It's kind of like a, you know, this adventure movie that was kind of has this 1950s, you know, the kind of movies they were doing like in the 50s, you know, the B movies and stuff, like Mummy or whatever, and these kind of movies. Well, I know that the Mummy movies were from the 30s and 40s and stuff, but you know what I'm saying, like Creature from the Black Lagoon, and this really has a kind of that adventure flair of the, you know, the Universal monster movies of the 30s, 40s, and 50s and stuff, and it very much has that tone, and that, you know, being a fan of those films, I definitely appreciated that aspect of it. Obviously, there's a little bit of, I guess, half-ass Indiana Jones, if you want to, you know, going on an expedition to try to find this and that or whatever. But the story about this movie is just they came across this, you know, this researcher guy or whatever came across this Yeti, or they came across, someone came across this Yeti, and have the Yeti remains, this big abominable, whatever the hell they call it, you know, snowman. He's not white or anything. He's like a brown color or whatever. This, I think they call it a Yeti, but it's discovered or whatever. And this early scene, luckily early on in the movie before the opening credits sequence, and of course it's a full moon movie, so they're going to have a full-blown opening title credit sequence and stuff. But the first scene of this movie luckily features some of that kind of exciting stop motion animation. And I gotta tell you, before I even go into the story and stuff, let me just say, like, the stop motion animation in this movie is so freaking wild, because it's like, it's so strange, because it's like, you know, arguably it's probably some of the last David Allen stop motion animation. Like I say, there might be some new Chris Endicott stop motion animation. I don't know all of that about that. There's just a, oh my god, there's just, you know, for what you'd expect from a full moon movie, like, there's so much frickin' stop motion animation in this movie. And what's so wild about it is so much of it, it's like, it's so, it's kind of mind-blowing, because it's so weird to watch a movie like this that was done in the, you know, the early to mid 90s. And I can only assume a lot of the stop motion animation was done back then. And like I say, I don't know how much of it would have been done now with Chris Endicott and company or whatever, just finishing some, you know, much needed shots and stuff. I know that there was a bunch of stuff that they couldn't afford to do, you know, so that's why there's like there's a David Allen cut where they use like animated, you know, storyboards or whatever. I haven't seen that version. I may not, unless it ends up on Tubi for free, but I might buy the normal Blu-ray. I don't think I can, you know, make myself spend $30 or more for the, like, the 3-disc one with the 2 versions of the movie, and then like the documentary. Hopefully that documentary's on Tubi or YouTube or something, because I'd like to see that documentary. Like, I don't know if it's like the making of Primevals or whatever, but that'd be interesting to see. But anyway, what I was saying is the stop motion animation in this movie is like, it's so wild. I keep on coming back to this. It's so wild to see this movie for the first time, like 30 years after it was being made, because it's like, one can only assume, since this was towards the end of David Allen's career, that like he has just gotten just better and better and better and better at stop motion animation, to the point where this is some of the best stop motion animation that I've ever seen. It's so, I don't know if they smoothed it in the computer, but it's, the majority of it is so smooth. And what's so cool about the Yeti As a part of your brain is like, God, that's so smooth. Is that even stop motion animation? But of course, if you know anything about stop motion animation when you're dealing with furry creatures, is that every time you touch it, as a result, you move the fur and stuff. So, every time you have an animated furry creature, it looks like it's in a windstorm or whatever. And obviously that is the case with the Yeti character. I'm just like, this movie kind of deserves, and I know it had like a very, very, very super limited theatrical run when they finished it and when it came out in 2023 and right on. And part of me wanted to go see it, and then I didn't. But I kind of wish I would have, but because it was kind of like a once in a lifetime to see, like, Primevals in the theater or whatever. But yeah, that's one thing I just want to not forget to mention, which how could you, is there's so much more like stop motion animation work in this than you'd think. And admittedly, there's a little bit at the beginning, and then they save most of it for the end or whatever. But which is to be expected. But oh my God, like seeing this type of stop motion animation like 30 years after they were doing it, it's like David Allen, really elevated himself to this position of like, wow, this is some really, really great stop motion animation. And it's just, when you watch the movie, it's like you're both sad that David Allen couldn't be around to complete this and see it come to fruition. You're both sad that stop motion animation is a thing of the past. The watching the movie kind of brings up all of these like feelings and stuff, and it's just like it truly is. And I've always thought stop motion animation was magical, and so many of the fans like Charles Band and others of stop motion animation, you say the same thing. There's some kind of magic, something so magical about just stop motion animation in general, and the fact that you're seeing something real move on its own and seemingly and all this kind of stuff that completely different from computer generated effects like stop motion animation. So it was really, I don't think I teared up at all watching this during some of them stop motion animation scenes, but very close to. If you're a fan of stop motion animation, oh my God, you got to see this movie. But the thing that's a bummer about the movie, and the trailer kind of indicated it, is before I ever saw it, is just like, admittedly, it's probably like I don't know if this would have been under like the Moonbeam label in the 90s. Full Moon had Full Moon Pictures, label was kind of for maybe more of your R-rated stuff, adult kind of themed horror movie, fantasy stuff or whatever, and then you had your Moonbeam label, which was movies that they made. I don't think they made as many movies for kids as they did their Full Moon stuff, but movies like Remote and Prehysteria and was there like some Pet Shop or something? I don't know, but I was certainly familiar with Prehysteria franchises, like 2 or 3 of those, and Remote. I've got the VHS of Remote. I've reviewed Remote, which is like a Home Alone kind of a ripoff and stuff. And Prehysteria, perfectly timed to come out on home video. I think the summer of Jurassic Park was in theaters, and not only that, but Last Action Hero was in theaters that same summer, and it was with that kid, frickin' Austin O'Brien, I think is his name, and Austin O'Brien was in Prehysteria. So I mean, I think Prehysteria did really well for Full Moon / Moonbeam, at the time. And one can only assume this would have come out under the Moonbeam label because it's totally family friendly. Like the violence is, PG violence, and but that's what I was getting at. I guess it occurred to me that Robot Wars, it's strange in retrospect that Robot Wars came out under Full Moon and not Moonbeam label, because I think Robot Wars was rated PG. So, but yeah, it's hard to say if this would have come out under Moonbeam or Full Moon, but what the whole reason I was saying that is because I was commenting on like the dialogue and the acting and stuff, and it's just like, God dang it, it's kind of very wooden and stuff. But I guess if I talked earlier about this movie following in the tradition of the the Universal monster movies of the 30s, 40s, and 50s and stuff. And I guess if you think about the acting in those movies, it's not necessarily that unwooden itself. So maybe this is a really nice kind of a in all aspects homage to the movies of the 30s, 40s, and 50s and stuff. But I don't think if you've seen the trailer, you probably know what the hell the movie's about. They go out on an expedition to find whatever. I can't even remember why they're looking for the Yeti, but they go out on an expedition to try to find, you know, more Yetis or whatever the hell they do, and come across stuff that remind me of, you know, a lot of the last half of like Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow and stuff, and some of the stuff they come up with and stuff. You know, obviously the majority of this movie is, you know, not that freaking amazing. Obviously the best parts of this movie is the, you know, stop motion animation stuff. But I will say there's more depth in the movie with the layers of like mystery and the you know, the layers of mystery that get peeled back and stuff. And it's like, and there was this really cool, I didn't want to forget to mention this, I can only assume it was like an animatronic alien that they built for this movie. They really, you know, they spared no expense with this production, because they did like an alien, you know, kind of your traditional. It wasn't like a gray or anything, but something along the lines of, God dang it, there's this other alien that it kind of reminded me of. Maybe it kind of looked like the aliens in Fire in the Sky or whatever, but kind of and it was, I think it was like fully animatronic. It wasn't like an animated alien, but they come across like an alien spaceship and this alien and stuff. And I was really surprised actually watching the movie how much, I don't want to, and I don't purport to say there's a whole kind of huge kind of depth to it, but definitely, you know, in some of the plot details, definitely more depth to it than I thought there would be based on that trailer that was out there ever since 2022 or 23 or whatever. But it's really interesting seeing, you know, that a lot of times some of the same actors will, you know, keep showing up in full moon movies from that era and stuff. And it's really interesting seeing this movie where it's like, I don't think any of these people I recognize from any other full moon movies or anything. And the main kind of, you know, hunky guy is, you know, it's funny how much he looks like David Allen, and I wonder if there was subconscious or conscious, you know, David Allen kind of wrote and directed this movie. He co-wrote it, the screenplay, with someone, and directed this movie. It's like, did he intentionally get this main, you know, hunky kind of guy that looks kind of like him? David Allen, I'm a strictly heterosexual, but Dave Allen wasn't, how do I say this as a strictly heterosexual male? But yeah, David Allen was actually kind of, you know, not repulsive, we'll say that. And it's for a guy that was behind the camera, he kind of had a face that almost should have been in front of the camera as well. But it's kind of interesting how the hunky guy, you know, from this movie kind of resembles David Allen a lot. But yeah, so I don't want to spoil, you know, especially if this is, since it's on TubiTV.com for free and stuff, you know, you can go and watch it yourself. I don't want to spoil this and that. I will say that I'm aware of the fact that there was like this action, like river scene that unfortunately didn't get to be completed because of budgetary constraints, that is in the David Allen cut or whatever, in the animated storyboards or whatever, however the hell they make that footage, they convey the scene, you know, and stuff. It just would have been a shame to have had that, you know, that river action scene or whatever the hell that was filmed and planned for this movie. Because one thing I will say in closing is that I was definitely like impressed by the amount of stop motion animation at the end of the movie, but then at the same time I was like, oh, like when it ended I was like, okay, that seemed kind of abrupt. And the reason why is probably because, you know, it just felt like, you know, maybe there should have been one more kind of scene, and I suppose that action scene on the river or whatever was, you know, unable to be completed with normal visual effects. I suppose that may have, you know, I don't know if that would have come, you know, at the end of the movie or where the hell it would have went, but it definitely feels like, you know, the normal cut or whatever, theatrical cut I think they call it, you know, the shorter version does definitely seem like it ends like, oh, it's ending there, huh? So that's a little bit of a bummer. So as much as I'm like, let's face it, as much as I'm praising the stop motion animation aspect of this movie, I mean, let's face it, it's a full, oh man, even though it's like all this money put behind it or whatever at the time and stuff, it's just such a goddamn bummer. Like, why couldn't have fate had it that David Allen could have, you know, lived to complete and to see his movie be completed? I mean, decades and decades, something he wanted to do for decades and decades. It's such a goddamn shame that he had to depart, this mortal plane before it was finished and before he could see it be finished. Oh, and before I wrap up the review, one thing I want to mention, it'd be interesting to know, I can only assume he did this music, recently as opposed to back then, but of course you've got music from Richard Band, Charles Band's brother, who did so much of the music for so many of Charles Band's movies and full moon movies and things. And I gotta tell you, although it's probably mostly, or not, if not all, like synthesized stuff and this and that, I mean, there's some aspects to the music for this movie that I think wonderfully encapsulate the retro, if you want to call it that, classic retro feel I think David Allen was going for. Because admittedly, David Allen probably grew up with those kind of universal 30s, 40s, 50s, monster movies and horror movies and that kind of stuff. So I think that David Allen was really, really trying to, recreate that himself and do something like that. And the music Richard Band ended up coming up with for this movie, I think for the most part, does really well. I think that I found myself with a couple, maybe 2-3 times throughout the movie being like, wow, that's a pretty cool theme, and oh, that's a cool theme. And like I say, one can only assume he did the music, when they recently finished it versus, I'm sure he didn't do the music, in the mid '90s or whatever. And I kind of want to email him, Richard Band, and see if he responds. But then if he doesn't respond, I'll be crushed. So I thought about doing that, but then I don't know if I'll do that. But one can only assume he fabricated the music. The music was done recently upon the film's recent completion or whatever. Hours after I shot this review, I actually decided to go for it and email Richard Band. Day later, it turns out I actually ended up getting a response from him, so I'll read my email and then his response. Pretty goddamn cool. I wrote, "This message is for Richard." Didn't know if it goes directly to him or what. "Grew up with your soundtracks on many full moon movies in the 90s. Those movies were so cool to me as a teenager at the time. They still hold an important place in my heart now as well. Wanted to say, I just saw the Primevals and thought your music was amazing and really made the scope of the movie seem even bigger than it already was. I wanted to congratulate you on yet another amazing score and thank you for all of the great movie music over the years. Did you record the score for the Primevals recently as it was being completed, or did you record it in the 90s? Thanks again for all of the amazing music. Nate." And Richard Band responded as follows, "Hi Nate, thank you for your kind email. It was very much appreciated. In answer to your question, I composed and recorded the score in 2022. Since I believed it required that big adventure epic sound, I recorded all the live strings in Bratislava, Slovakia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. On a huge soundstage with over 65 string players. It would have been financially impossible to record it in the USA or almost anywhere else and achieve the sound I wanted. As you likely know, this was quite a labor of love for all of us involved in its making for over 35 years. If you're interested, my soundtrack and many others is available in vinyl and CD formats on my site at richardbandmusic.com. Once again, I thank you. All the best, Richard Band." Definitely glad I went for it and sent him that email. I definitely got more information back than I thought I would. It was really freaking crazy to learn that there was that many, what do you say, 65 strings or something like that recorded in a huge soundstage. So they really went for it for this production, and gosh dang it, it's really cool to get that email back and get that a little bit of additional info. So very cool. I was heading towards the star rating, which it's really a difficult situation because it's like, for as technically savvy and how much time and effort they spent on all them stop motion animation effects, it doesn't undo the fact that, unfortunately, like I said, the whatever infantile nature of the movie, but again, like, you can't look at it. You got to try to look at it through the lens of a movie from the 30s or the 40s or the 50s. But as a movie, I was gonna go 2 stars. But the more I think about it, the achievement it is, I can go as high as 2.5 stars out of 4 stars for the Primevals. Don't get me wrong, like, there's movies that I give, 2-star ratings or whatever, or in this case 2.5-star ratings. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy them. Like I say, I mean, the stop motion animation of sequences in this movie, I can't stress how absolutely frickin', like I say, it's like some of the best stop motion animation I've ever seen. And like I say, it makes you wonder if they smoothed it in the computer, or if it's that smooth, that is some stellar stop motion animation. So that's pretty much all I can say. Hopefully, if you come across this video now, or weeks, months, years later, hopefully you can still see this movie on TubiTV.com for free. Like I say, I was planning on buying the Blu-ray, then the price went up, then I thought about renting it digitally, then I'm like, why do that if it's going to be on Tubi later? And I might buy the Blu-ray. I think the Blu-ray is only $10 now or something. It's definitely something that I can see definitely wanting to own and revisit and stuff, and see what Beth thinks. I know she'd probably appreciate the stop motion animation and stuff. So, oh my God, like I say, it's just such a shame that, after decades and decades, David Allen finally got to start and do so much work on his dream project, and then, depart before it was able to be finished. It's such a just goddamn bummer. And just imagine, like, just the actors, like, being in this movie and having it never come out. I can only assume the older woman who was in the movie probably may not even be with us anymore. And that's another thing I was going to say, that one kind of Indiana Jones guy, or the guide they get, like, I've seen him in like, I think, quote unquote, well, I was going to say real movies. I mean, this is a real movie. So there, but I've seen that guy in other stuff. I think when he was younger. I don't know what the hell I seen him in, but the Indiana Jones slash kind of the guide, expedition guide or whatever, is definitely a familiar face. But everyone else I don't really recognize or whatever. So I guess that'll pretty much do it for my review of David Allen's The Primevals. It is, I think, really, say what you will about Charles Band, he's probably a slippery, slimy snake in a lot of regards in business, dealings and all this and that or whatever, but, which is very well, might be the case, and I, wouldn't contest that, but, I think it was good of him at least to actually, all these frickin' decades, years later and stuff, actually kind of more or less finish the Primevals and put it out there for people to actually enjoy. And so, I guess good on him for that. Like, I can remember back when he was trying to get crowdfunding to get the post-production work completed, and then, like, that went away, and then, like, you never heard for years, it seemed like, anything about Primevals. You're like, was that just another scam? And but sure enough, it ended up coming out, so that was pretty amazing. But yeah, the whole project is just, I can't help but feel when I think about it, and just, David Allen passing on before he could see it finish. It's just so melancholy or whatever, but at least now we can finally, I guess, finally see it. So yay us, and yay Charles Band and everyone involved in finishing it, I guess. So I guess that pretty much does it for my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, we'll catch you on the next video.